Good morning, good afternoon, and greetings to everyone from all over the world who is attending this fabulous conference. I am an alcoholic. My name is Ashley. My sobriety date is the 30th of December, 2006. And how an alcoholic like me ends up at a conference like this is just an absolute mystery. I'm very grateful to the committee for asking me to be here. I'm slightly dumbfounded, but exceedingly excited and somewhat nervous to talk about the 12 concepts of service and how I practice them in all my relationships. Um, I have thoroughly enjoyed the conference and all of the speakers. Thank you to Richard for speaking about concepts 9 and 5. You know, and I have a personal connection with Steve, who spoke last night. He attended the Monday through Friday nooner in Franklin, Tennessee, where I got sober. I had a belly full of pink champagne and a head full of AA, and I heard him share, and he modeled what Alcoholics Anonymous is and is not. And I wanted what he had, and eventually I surrendered. And to end up being at a conference with trustees and delegates and Steve is just really beyond my wildest imagination. And I really don't think that 55 minutes is a lot of time to talk about all 12 concepts of service, and I'm not going to talk real fast. So I'm going to sort of blend 6 into 8 and unpack others more fully than some. And I thought about starting with the general warranties of the conference because they are the aria of the 12 concepts of service. But I want to tell you just a little bit first about my alcoholism and a little bit about the family system in which I grew up, and really try to tell you I do not intend this to be a dazzling talk because, first of all, I'm not capable of that. I want it to be a very practical talk so that when you leave here today, maybe you can grasp a hold of one of these concepts of service and literally use them in your thought process, in a relationship, in a practical, tangible way. I literally invoke these as I am walking through my daily life with the people I love, and they are as practical to me as our slogans, as our steps, and as our traditions. And they also very much interweave with our steps and traditions. And so they're referential and they are resonant with each other. And I won't have time to demonstrate that fully, but I hope to sort of diagram a little bit. I am a sparkly alcoholic, you know, and Steve reassured me that there was a place in Alcoholics Anonymous for the white wine and cheese alcoholics like me, and that I didn't have to take the elevator all the way down to the basement or ride the dump truck all the way to, you know, the landfill. And I'm real thankful for that. But I absolutely had an obsession with the first drink. And when I ingested that first sip of white wine or pink champagne, the phenomenon of craving kicked in, and I wanted more. And I wanted to chase that sensation that is talked about in the doctor's opinion. And it was my great obsession that I could control and enjoy my drinking. And I learned that by reading the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous and by reading the grapevine. But I also come from an alcoholic family system. And there's generations of alcoholism. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of dysfunction. I grew up with a parent with an untreated mental illness. And I experienced a lot of sexual assault and rape as a child. And all of these things make the concepts of service important to me because what they talk about is relationship between people and entities. And all of this was super messed up in the way I grew up. So I didn't learn about what the concepts teach. They teach authority, responsibility, delegation, participation, leadership, decision making. And all of that was like poof for me, both in the family in which I grew up and then in my own disease. So concept 1, and what I'm going to try to do is the nugget and tell you how I've identified certain core words and brought them into my soul. So in concept 1, it talks about how the final responsibility, keyword, ultimate authority, keywords, for AA World Services, that's the entity, should always reside in the collective conscience of our fellowship. So the fellowship in this sense, when I'm applying it to myself, is me. And what this concept means to me is that I am responsible for my own life. I am responsible for my own happiness. I'm responsible for my own disease. It's not my fault I have a disease, but once I have the education about my disease, I am responsible for treating it. And this also means that I have no authority over someone else. I'm not responsible for my sponsee's sobriety. I'm not responsible for my parents' untreated mental illness today. And even though my husband and I have this tremendous relationship and I feel so good when I'm with him, and I could easily ask him to import all those good feelings into me, I can't expect him to do for me what I can and should do for myself. I don't look to that relationship to do for me the things that that relationship has never it's never intended to do for me. So my responsibility is to cultivate my own well-being. Number one, by working these 12 steps, by having a God of my understanding that takes me to step 2, and having a God concept that works for me, by practicing step 11. And it also invokes tradition 7 and being emotionally self-supporting. So I have authority over myself, I have authority over no one else, and I am respondability to my own life. Now, this also teaches me that I don't know what's good for other people. And my motives may be very good, but Bill is very clear in step 11 in the 12 and 12 that when I pray for other people, I may have all the best intentions, but I'm still praying my will for them. And so whether it's someone's disease or their debt or their whatever, I just pray step 11 for them. I say, may so-and-so have knowledge of your will for them, and may they have the power to carry that out. And that keeps me right sized, and it keeps me in my hula hoop, and it keeps me from trying to manage and manipulate and mother other people. And I have to be honest, I'm not doing a great job of this right now. My husband is Swiss, and so we stay in Europe for the summer, and my world gets very small when I'm with him. And so I have a tendency to look to him to do for me what I can and should do for myself. So I need to expand my horizons. So we're going to move on to concept 2, because what concept 2 teaches me is that while I am autonomous and while I am responsible for myself, I need relationship, because concept 2 is about delegated authority, because the fellowship obviously can't do everything for itself. We have a general service office, we have a general service board, we have a board of trustees. And so while I am autonomous, I am not meant to be totally independent or anti-dependent. I am a relational social creature. I need relationship. I need my higher power. So that's number 1. I need the God of my understanding. Number 2, I need a sponsor. I need the humility and the willingness to know how to ask for help. I need the women with whom I walk in close recovery relationship, my chosen family. And I do need my egalitarian, beautiful marriage that helps me grow and shows me my shadow side and allows me to heal those childhood wounds. And the other beautiful thing about this is that when I learn how to be in relationship, and then in practical ways, when I learn how to delegate, when I am delegated to, when someone trusts me with relationship, it builds my self-esteem, it builds my dignity, it is empowering to me. I become a trustworthy person. It's like when I have the distinct pleasure and the honor of receiving a 5th step from another woman in this program who trusts me in a beautiful way. So I like to think about concept 1 and concept 2 as sort of standing in this beautiful gap where my hand is reached out, and I'm holding my own hand, which is something I've learned how to do in this program, but I'm also holding my higher power's hand and the hand of my fellows. So concept 3, as many of you all know, talks about the right of decision. And this is a very important concept for me because I didn't get to make a lot of decisions for myself growing up. I also have a kitty cat. There was one decision I made for myself growing up, which was after a year in which I lived completely by myself when I was abandoned by one of my parents. And I moved myself to go live with the other parent, and that parent left $50 in an envelope and left the state to go drink and drug. So that was a decision I got to make for myself with disastrous outcomes. So the right of decision is built into the entire fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what the right of decision means in my life is that I have the freedom to decide when and how to proceed. And I am empowered with discernment because today I can trust myself in my sobriety, in my emotional sobriety. I can trust myself. I've developed my conscience. I know that I have good judgment. And when I get new information and there is incoming data, I have the freedom to change my mind. And I can do so with confidence. I don't have to vacillate and be all willy-nilly and go running around to, 6 or 7 different people. What do you think? What do you think? Or Google the answer. I'm trusted to do the best I can. And the other thing is, I allow others the dignity of doing the best that they can when they make their decisions. I don't give advice. I don't snoopervise. I let others have the dignity of their own process. And I let people do things their own way. And so here's a very consequential circumstance in which I used the right of decision. When the pandemic first happened, I was out listening to one of my favorite authors give a talk, and I got a text that the then president of the US closed the US borders. And my husband was skiing in Switzerland, and we weren't going to have any contact for 10 days. And I just got this sick feeling that if the US closed its borders, European countries were going to close their borders, and we were going to be stranded from each other across an ocean for an indefinite period of time. And knowing that I was endowed in our relationship with the right of decision, if I had information that he did not possess, I chose to leave that talk, go home, pack my bag, and fly to Switzerland. And boom, when he came down off the mountain, hi, honey, here I am. And that was the right thing to do, because sure enough, 2 days later, Switzerland closed its borders, and we would have been separated from each other for 6 months. And so that's me literally, as I said at the beginning of my talk, thinking through which of the 36 principles of Alcoholics Anonymous applies to this decision, rifling through my toolbox. Right of decision makes effective leadership possible. Now, here's an example where I didn't like it very much, and I'll get to this when we talk about legal and traditional rights. I parented my niece, and she had to go to like 12 meetings over a 2-week period. And she went to 4 meetings in 3 days. Not the way I would have preferred she do it, but she got to do it her way. And then it also applies to really, little itty bitty things. My husband is the most competent person in the world. And sometimes he just sort of helicopters over me, and I say right of decision. And he's like, oh, 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 oh. And he like backs up like the of the truck. He just backs up. So, and this is one of those things where, I talk about problems because the concepts are really good for problem solving. So this is where we kind of get into some of the places where the relationship rubs on me a little bit. Concept 4, the nugget, it's very long, and I can, Lois and Al-Anon says participation is the key to harmony. And I can always imagine Lois kind of patting Bill on the knee and saying, oh, honey, is what you're trying to say is participation is the key to harmony? Why, by Jove, Lois, that's it. Concept 4 is vital to me when we are in Europe, because we have this co-parenting constellation where my husband's daughter is 7 and she lives with her mother. And just like AA and Al-Anon are separate entities, but they cooperate, we're separate entities with the mother, but we have a very close cooperative co-parenting arrangement for the common welfare of the common child. And it's very easy for me to not participate because I get fight, flight, or freeze, even though I'm safe and my trust muscle is really strong. I don't speak German. That's an area where I have totally under participated and not contributed to my own harmony. And I have to invoke this concept and make myself participate. So I can just get paralyzed at the kitchen table when we're sharing a meal, the 4 of us, and I have to say, get up and do the dishes. Get up and cook something, get up and go play with a child. And I want to give an example of how I used this in a way that was very effective. It was my husband's birthday and I had a day planned for him. And the night before, we had done something together as a family. We went out rock climbing. And the mom was feeling guilty because she was taking the daughter to go see her dad for his birthday, which coincides with my husband's birthday. And all of a sudden she announced, because she was feeling guilty, she said, you know what, I'm not taking the daughter to go see my dad. We're going to stay in town so we can all be together on your birthday. And I was like, where's the informed group conscience? Where is my participation? Where's the minority voice that is allowed to petition and be heard? Because I had plans for us on his birthday and all of this was just sprung on me. And my husband was like, oh, that's great. Thank you. We'll all go do something, the four of us. Not happy, me not happy. So I thought about it and I thought that it was tradition to concepts 4 and 5. And the next day when I had a chance, because the mom and I have a great relationship, we go out for coffee, we have our own channels of communication, we're very direct with each other. I'm a woman amongst women, unlikely female alliances, and we're not people who would normally mix. And I said to her, you know, I really felt that it was a kind thing that you did. And I had our own plans. And in the future, because a complaint is a request for behavior change in disguise. So rather than complaining about what she did, I asked for what I would want and need in the future. And I said, in the future, if you're going to change the plans, I would really appreciate being consulted and included. And she said, oh, I see what you mean. And she was very apologetic because there was disharmony because I had not been allowed to participate. And so I used my minority voice, and that was that. So belonging speaks to a very deep spiritual need, and it adds to my safety. And so I'm constantly examining, where am I participating? Where am I isolating myself? Where is my self-respect? Where is my dignity? Because I can't expect others to respect me unless I'm respecting myself. And then that also goes with how I'm allowing others to participate, and I being exclusive. Am I, you know, how much do I widen the circle and allow others in? So concept 5 is also a very important concept for me because when I'm in Europe, I'm a cultural minority. The mom is East German, which is very specific. My husband is Swiss. And sometimes I just feel like they've got numbers on me and they do things their way. So for example, when we go to the lake, everybody takes their clothes off and changes into their swimming clothes. And the first couple times this happened, I was just like, ah, you know, and I felt like the prudish American who was, you know, and I shamed myself and I'm supposed to do things their way. And so I thought, okay, concept 5. And I just went to my husband and I said, look, I would appreciate it if you would change into your swimming trunks at home rather than getting butt ass naked at the lake. And he said, not a problem. But I don't have the skill set from my background to know how to do that without using one of the 12 concepts of service. You know, it's a mental construct for me that allows me to have a tangible tool, a mental gadget that gets me there. And, you know, we do some communal living when we're with the daughter, and there are just some symbolic things that can be tricky for me. And so I think about concept 5 and as, you know, where I'm the minority. And then I also have to be very careful where others are the minority and allow them to have voice and allow them to have space. And the thing about this is when the process of participation and the informed group conscience, and I want to make sure that I mentioned with the informed group conscience, when there has been transparency, I can know that the process has been fair and I can live with the outcome, even if it has not gone my way, because I believe that the process had integrity. And there was something that really killed me over the winter holidays because the process did not have this transparency. And so the mom, when she goes on vacation alone with the daughter, she sometimes will ask if we would like to visit. And we do that, but my husband and I are very careful because fourth tradition, we're autonomous and we're separate. And if something affects the daughter, then we consult. And that's one of the ways that we apply tradition for. And so if the mom's on vacation with the daughter, we might say, thank you for the invitation. You know, we'll talk about it because we are a package deal. We are a unit and we don't triangulate or speak as individuals. We make sure that we present a unified coupleship, and we'll take our own transportation to get there. We have our own sleeping arrangements, and we don't stay the entire time. You know, if she's there for a week, we might stay overnight and have our own tent and that sort of thing. And then the same is true reciprocally. If we're on vacation, because we always want to have access to the daughter when she's on vacation, we might invite the mom to join us on vacation for a night or two. But this past winter, I was not able to go on our typical New Year's Eve holiday because of COVID. And the mom's vacation was canceled also because of COVID. And so she invited her on my husband's New Year's holiday for 8 days. And I didn't know anything about it. And she showed up and she stayed in a communal space and was there the entire time. And I was absolutely devastated. I was just crushed. And it's because I had not had this right of consultation. I had not been allowed to participate. And I'd not had this meaningful way of shaping what it looked like. And I felt tremendously excluded. And so we learned from that. And, you know, my husband's very familiar with the fact I'm giving this talk today, and we banter back and forth about the concepts. And so the point is, if I use these tools in my relationships, they have a very measurable impact on my emotional sobriety. They aren't just this abstract thing that applies to the relationship between the board of trustees and the conference and, you know, the service manual study that we do for 30 minutes before the real meeting starts. They really can affect my emotional sobriety. So that's concept. That's how I use concept 5 when I'm the persecuted minority, which telling these stories makes it sound like I am. So concept 6, I'm going to blend into concept 8. So concept 7 saved my life. I mean, I staked my life on concept 7. And concept 7 is about how the conference is the traditional custodian of the traditions, and the board of trustees has legal rights. And how this applied to my life in a very critical 9-month period was, I have this young relative in my life with whom I was very close, and I was always a traditional presence in her life. You know, she came over, she spent the night, we had slumber parties, we had tea parties. We talked about her period when she began to menstruate. We talked about boys, and she was being actively abused in her home. And every bad thing that could happen to a girl happened to this child, whether it was, you know, physical and sexual abuse or being raised with active alcoholism and drug addiction. And it was just a very ugly, hard, traumatic childhood. And what she knew from me was that there was another way to live, and that there was another type of household, and there was another type of parenting. And that's what I tried to model and be for her through my traditional presence as an aunt figure. And I worked a lot with my outside help and a lot with my sponsor. You know, do I call and report the family to the state? Nuclear option, or do I just influence her in traditional ways and use the access that I'm granted? I mean, things would happen like she was supposed to come and stay for a week, and she would show up without a suitcase and be here for a couple of hours. So all of a sudden I was given legal custody and she came to live with me. And then suddenly I had to make this transition to having a legal responsibility for her and having legal duties So it wasn't just about her telling me a story of blowing her curfew. It's that I became legally responsible for that curfew and how many kids she had in the car with her and whether or not she was wearing her prescription glasses when she drove and whether or not when kids came over here, they were drinking and drugging. And, you know, this kid was wild and unhinged and she was just doing what she was trained to do and her disease was right on time. And it was this concept and knowing that I had a legal obligation and I was legally responsible for her that gave me the backbone and the fortitude and the courage to do what I needed to do to keep her safe while she lived with me. She had never been educated, and all of a sudden she had to go to school. I mean, that was an epic battle. And, you know, I was able to do this with love and dignity and respect, but I held my line because I knew that I had a legal obligation to do so. And I constantly went back to this concept and I constantly went back to my sponsor. And, you know, there were lots of legal people involved, the guardian ad litem and my lawyer and her lawyer. And, you know, one morning she didn't want to get up and go see her mom. And I was like, well, you know, that's between her mom and her. And then I found out that I would be taken to court if she didn't get her butt out of bed and go see her mom, that I was legally accountable for that. And I'm like, concept 7, let's go, kid. You got to go. And again, I don't know where I would have had this information if it weren't for this concept. So I was very thankful for it. And it wasn't easy. And then, it, you know, she stole my car once and drove out of state. And, you know, I would have loved to have let that go because I didn't want her to be any more entangled with the system than she was. But, you know, because as we know, the juvenile system, especially for kids and the girls in the sexual abuse to prison pipeline, is just a disaster. And I called her and I gave her fair warning. And then I told her that legally I was going to have to do what I was obliged to do. And I won't go into the details of that story, but it all worked out. And then, of course, you know, it's amazing how calling all these parents and saying, you know, your children are welcome to come over, but it's a clean and sober household. And I'll be taking their keys when they get here. And how so many parents don't care. How so many parents don't care. And then they come over and they drink and drug anyway. And then you got to kick them all out. But you got to do legally what you got to do. So concept 8, you know, I didn't know anything about how to be an employer. And concept 8 taught me how to be an employer because I'm very blessed to have a beautiful little farmhouse that I worked very hard, you know, to earn. And I travel a great deal. And having this farmhouse and being able to hire a housekeeper to help me look after it, I did not know my rear end from my elbow when it came to administering this house. And so looking at concept 6 and looking at concept 8 taught me that I was the board of trustees when it came to my home, and that I could trust myself to hire a good employee to whom I delegated the routine administrative day-to-day running of the house, just like we have delegated the routine administrative running of the general service office in New York City to the GSO and the staff and the committees there. They empty the waste paper baskets, they answer the phones, they run the website, they get the literature translated into, what is it, 77 languages that the big book is in now. And furthermore, because I've hired this good person, I can trust her to delegate to qualified people, whether it's the painter or the electrician or the gardener or the plumber. And I don't have to micromanage all of those individual activities. But because I'm the board of trustees, I'm legally responsible and I'm financially responsible. So if there's something that needs to happen here, she gets all the bids and then I have to look at them and I help choose, but I defer to her because she's the one with the day-to-day practical knowledge of what's going on around here. And I don't second guess her, and to use that word again, I don't snooperize supervise her. And she is also, going back to concept 3, endowed with the right of decision to make appropriate decisions, because I'm not here all the time and I don't have the up-to-date information. And an example of that is I was away, I think I was in Madagascar, and one of my animals got sick, and she chose to put the animal to sleep. And I came home and found out that my kitty cat was gone. And I just said, thank you so much for using your good judgment. I'm sure that was a very tough call. You know, I didn't say, how dare you, or why didn't you wait, or use heroic measures. You know, I should have had the opportunity to say goodbye. She had the right of decision to make the best choice she could while I was not reachable. And so, and how concept 6 relates is she has everything that she needs to do the job effectively. So she is matched with what she needs, whether it's the right kind of vacuum cleaner, or if she needs a different kind of washing machine, or, you know. And the other thing that I want to mention about this is I've learned how to be an employer who treats people with dignity and respect, you know, paying a fair market price, giving raises when appropriate. And I found out once, when I was away a long time, that I hadn't given her a raise over a couple of years. And I was so ashamed of myself. I gave her all of her back raises, calculated all the interest that she had made, and compounded it, and gave her everything that she was entitled to and that she had missed out on, because I had messed up. And, you know, flex time, elder care, when she had a younger child, the child came to work here, you know, she has everything that she needs in order to be able to do the job well. Concept 9, good leadership, doing what my higher powers will for me is. That's the best leadership I can exercise in my life. You know, discerning what my higher powers will for me is. You know, one of my favorite prayers is, open my heart to your will. Another one of my favorite prayers is, please increase my desire for what is good for me. And I mean, it's a standby classic. Help me do the next good, right, honest thing. So one of the ways that I've had good leadership in my life is by working this program with all my might. And my relationships were absolute catastrophes. And it's not a contest, but I would have put my family situation up against any ruined, abysmal family relationship. And things were just really messy between my parents and me. And by working the program, and especially believing that through steps 8 and 9, miracles could happen and relationships could be restored. Today, I can say that I have loving relationships with both of my parents, who were my primary abusers. And that does not make me good, right, and perfect. It means that I was willing, and that I was really hurting, and that my higher power worked miracles in my life, and that changed attitudes aided recovery, and that through following the tenets of the program and my changing, my being different, and the stability and the things that Bill talks about in his leadership essay, allowed those relationships to be restored. And I just kept my head down and did what I needed to do. And my parents thought I was nuts when I got into recovery. Why are you going to those meetings? You're different, you've changed. But I just stuck with the program. Another way that I try to practice good leadership at all service levels, and this has been talked about at the conference, is I do speak up at meetings when a tradition is being broken. And particularly, you know, if someone is sharing about a specific example I have is, there was someone at a meeting who spoke up during the announcements and said, hey, a local church is doing a series on recovery, and the preacher is going to talk about alcoholism and recovery in his sermons for the next 6 weeks. And I was like, you know, my face was melting and my armpits got sweaty, and I got just like super uncomfortable. And my litmus test when I exercise what I hope is good personal leadership at that level is there a newcomer present? Is there a newcomer present? And what does that say about Alcoholics Anonymous? And so I waited a little while, And what I chose to do was reread the preamble, because the preamble to me is this foundational document that says what Alcoholics Anonymous is and is not. And of course, we're not allied with any sect or denomination. And I just elaborated and said, you know, I just want to remind all of us that we believe alcoholism is a disease, and that the AA program, and you know what else I said, because this is why we're all here. And I don't relish doing this, and I get very nervous and I get very anxious and I feel extremely uncomfortable doing this. But during this 1 hour that we're gathered together, we practice the AA principles, and we leave all outside affiliations outside of this room for this 1 hour. And the other 23 hours of the day, we're absolutely free to pursue the information and other avenues of recovery that we choose to. And then if someone shares AA other than AA literature, I do the same thing. I love what Debbie taught me, is that the literature is a neutral partner. So I try to find something in AA literature that I share, so it doesn't seem like I'm coming off as the authority, or that I have this exclusive information that no one else can access, but rather I find it in our literature so that everyone knows where it's coming from, and share that. And then also just get honest and vulnerable. Like, this is hard to do. And my hand does shake and my palms do get sweaty. And it's not meant to be punitive or an incitement to public controversy. You know, general warranties, the concept of the general warranties, concept 12. And during the other 23 hours, I read lots of other literature that I find helpful. But when I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I confine my discussion exclusively to literature published by AA and the Grapevine. So another way that I try to exercise good personal leadership in my relationship is by listening, you know, really, really listening. And there was someone who, so Richard talked about that, and a couple of other people really talked a lot about listening. Steve did last night. And, you know, I try to defer my answers or my feelings until my partner has shared everything he wants to share. I reflect back what I've heard him say and validate his reality, witness his experience, and then I take my turn, because I have the trust today that I will be known and seen when it is my turn, and that there is space enough for both of us to have the fullness of our experience. And so trying to delay my gratification is one of the ways that I really try to exercise leadership in my relationships. And I do this with sponsees, and I do this in my marriage. And that's a very important tenet of leadership to me. And then I wanted to tell you about an experience that I had in public, where I feel like trying to stand up for and be a leader in different ways in AA and in my relationship allowed me to take a leadership stand in a very tense public situation. I was in an airport at a security gate, and there was all kinds of uniformed personnel. It was after there had been a big public disaster. And so there were all the security people at the gate. There were a lot of additional sort of paramilitary people there. It was very tense. It was an international security queue. There were people from many different faith backgrounds, babies with dirty diapers that couldn't be changed. Everyone was very tense and restless. And this man was physically abusing his son, who was crying. And he was being very rough with him. It was very evident that this was not a questionable case. This was outright physical abuse, and no one was doing anything. Everyone was just either turning their heads or openly staring, and no one intervened. I just stepped out of line, kind of funny double entendre, and approached him from a safe distance. And I said, "Excuse me, sir, I would like to support you to stop treating your son that way." And, you know, my underarms were super sweaty and I was just like trembling, but I had a very strong, steady voice, because Alcoholics Anonymous, through this concept and tradition 10, has taught me how to stand for something without standing against my fellows. And through Concept 12 has taught me that I can do something without it being personally punitive or an incitement to public controversy. Now, other people may have thought it was controversial, but to me, it was just the right thing to do. It was not controversial. And I'm very glad I did that, because nobody did that for me when I was a child. And the plaintive cry of everyone who has survived child abuse the way I did was, where was everybody? Where was everybody? And that child on that day, whether or not he remembers it, if he does, will say, there was somebody who was there that day. And I think that that's an element of Concept 9 in my life. So Concept 10 is very important to me, to go back to my relationship, because it's about double-headed management and the authority to do one's job well. And you know, the young girl in my life, she has a mother, and I am not it. I'm a bonus parent. I'm someone who can love her extra, who can give her additional love, who can be that special person who adds more sparkle to her life, who gives her additional support, who jumps in and plays a game. And I'm very clear to do her mother's job. This is not about duplicate. I'm not trying to be her best friend. And this double-headed management that we talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me to give the child space to come to me and to respect her boundaries and to let her be a toss in such a way to trust with me in the way that her. And that has really paid up, because, you know, I've never had a bonus child before. And when I first met her, she would hug me. And so I waited. Transportation in Switzerland are beautiful and clean. And she said, 3 places, please. But I didn't assume that she would want to sit next to me, but then she picked a seat and we all sat next to each other. And knowing that she has a mom and I'm not it allows me to know that she is a person who is growing towards me in her own way and her own pace. And it also allows me to know when to give, when I'm around her mom, which, as I've explained, I am a lot, to give her mom and her privacy. Like if they're having a cuddling moment or if it's time for the bedtime story, I'm discreet and I clear out. I don't intrude. And it just helps me feel good about myself, because otherwise I would be like shifting from foot to foot, and what do I do and how do I do it, and what's my role and what's my place, and going back to Concept 4, where do I participate, where do I butt out? And so I rely on Concept 10 to help me feel clean, about what my boundaries are, and to let this child grow toward me in the way that is right for her. I'm the adult. She's the little one, and I want her to set the norms. So Concept 11 is just pure fun. It's just pure fun. It's about committees, you know, because all the data and all the polls in America show that couples struggle with dividing the chores and the housework, and it's still very gendered, except for a lot of gay and queer couples. They seem to for some reason do a better job with that. And so, you know, my partner and I, we have a lot of committees, and our committees rotate per tradition too. He's definitely the rock climbing committee, the map. I can't read it at all. But we, the gardening committee, we share. The grocery committee rotates. The cooking committee rotates. The daily cleaning committee is me, because his workload is such that he has more to do on a daily basis, but he does the weekly cleaning, including the toilets. And then I'm totally in charge of the housing and the flights, because he's hopeless at that. keeping tabs on our financial. We rotate because he really thinks it sucks to be the one who's like, you owe me money. And that makes him feel bad. And then he does the driving, and I'm the DJ and the podcast committee. And we do this with a great deal of levity. We add yeast to it, and it just makes things really fun. And we also, per tradition 7, because our financial status is a little different, we have worked that out in a really fun way. So for example, I mean, he could sleep anywhere. Like, we're having this communal holiday coming up, and in his magic wand, I kid you not, he grew up in a house with plenty of bedrooms, but his brothers and he slept on the floor in a bedroom together because his parents wanted them to be very close, and they are. So for our communal holiday, his magic wand is that everyone would sleep in sleeping bags on the living room floor around the fire. And just everyone would go to sleep whenever they fall asleep, and there would be chit-chatting, and the conversations would drift off and resume. And of course, this is like, I grew up isolated and alone and playing in the woods. The Queen Anne's lace was taller than I was by the time I was in the woods alone. I mean, I grew up so isolated that this is my worst nightmare. So I have a lot to learn. And that's, again, where my participation comes in, and my stretching and my growing. And so when we rent places, we find the place that he would like, which is like super cheap, the place that I would like, which is usually a little more expensive, and he pays what he would pay, and then I pay the premium, and that's how we divide it. And that's our tradition 7. And we just have found a very peaceful way to navigate all of this, and that blends in with our committee work. So I'm very delighted that I am going to have time to cover the 12th concept, the general warranties of the conference, because they are the basic tenets for a spiritual life. They are the basic tenets for a spiritual life. So the first one talks about a prudent reserve, and in the text it talks about a prudent financial reserve, and that's absolutely true. But I want to talk about like a prudent emotional reserve, because I can deplete myself. And when I'm in the woods, the way I think about a prudent energetic reserve is I get very ambitious when I hike. So if I want to go to Shuckstack Tower in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and that's 8 miles, I think, well, hot dog, I'm going to go hike that 8 miles. Well, guess what? It's also 8 miles back to the trailhead. And I totally disregard that. And I have to think, Ashley, concept 12, prudent energetic reserve, because I will totally deplete myself to get to Shuckstack Tower and not think about how, in fact, dangerous it might be for me to hike the rest of the 8 miles back to my car. So I get over ambitious, I stretch myself, and I do that on a lot of my hiking. And so that's that. I had a catastrophic accident recently, and I was in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we do some work. And I was walking, and my headlamp was faulty and not able to be on the brightest setting. And I fell, and I broke my leg in 4 places, and I had deep nerve damage. And I was, the leg was very badly misshapen. The bones were dramatically out of place. And to cut to the moral of the story, it took 55 hours before I was able to receive medical attention. And so the first part of that was lying on the forest floor for 5.5 hours, and talk about needing a prudent emotional reserve, because I knew that there was no help and there was no medication. And Alcoholics Anonymous was with me, and this concept was with me the entire time, because I knew that I could have no expectations of any kind of help or hope or intervention. And that number one, concept 1, I was responsible for my own pain, and I was responsible for my own experience, and I couldn't make anyone else responsible for what was going on inside of me. But number 2, concept 2, I knew I wasn't alone, because there was someone sitting with me. And that somehow or another, with a God of my understanding, who I believe suffers with me, I just had to get through this one breath, one scream, one animalistic cry at a time. And I didn't know what that was going to look like, but I knew that God wouldn't have, I don't think that God put me in that position, but that I had somehow to be capable of something that I didn't think I was capable of. And so I thought of what the reserve was that was going to somehow get me through that. And, you know, it was a very dramatic story. And all I know is that somehow or another, this concept came into play, and somehow having the reserve to hold my bones together when I had to be on a motorbike for 6 hours, to somehow, and this doesn't make me a hero in any way, shape, or form, but I knew that I just had the good sense not to take it out on other people, to be able to say please and thank you when I needed a drink of water. And when this man came to set my bones with his bare hands, to know that it wasn't his fault, you know, that it wasn't his fault, and that he was there to help me. And it was just a really deep experience. And I don't know that it would have been very different without AA and without this concept. So the next one is important to me too, because it talks about how no one is an unqualified authority over another person. And one of the things that I have to watch for is I can let other people be an unqualified authority over me. You know, I can let someone subtly boss me around or put me down or make me feel small or less than. You know, someone just during our talk sent me a really crappy text message that was very insulting, you know, and I don't know what that's about. And I make up a story that I'm doing a terrible job with my talk. And so I momentarily let them be an unqualified authority over me. And so I have to, you know, remember that people aren't doing it to me, they're just doing it, and I don't know what's going on with them, that they don't like what I'm saying, and brush that off, and remember that I have healthy self-esteem and a God of my understanding, and let that go. But also I need to remember that we're all equals, and our traditions and our concepts reinforce that all the way through, that we are equals, that this is an egalitarian fellowship. And our tradition, our third tradition, is so much about how we are all equals. We just have a desire to stop drinking, and it erases the differences between us. And you know, this resonates with concept 4, because if I don't participate, then I'm either less than or more than. And if I don't speak up, then I'm letting that unqualified authority pendulum swing in one way. And it teaches me, this unqualified authority, to assert myself in appropriate ways. And it also teaches me to have the maturity not to speak up when that's appropriate, you know? And it teaches me to let others shine when it's appropriate for them to shine. And I have to watch for dominance in myself in conversation. And, you know, and there's something that's really wonderful that I like about conversation, and I have to watch this with my mom, you know, the 3 C's. If I say something once, I'm communicating. If I say it a second time, I'm clarifying. If I say it a third time, I'm controlling. And that's a subtle form of control. And so, and also trying to use the traditions as a bludgeon. You know, that's one of the ways that we can put ourselves in unqualified authority over others, if we're using the traditions to try to direct our group in a specific direction if the group isn't doing what we think we want them to do. Now, the next one, discussion, vote, and unanimity. You know, one of my favorite things about the discussion is that everyone should have the same access to all the information. Otherwise, it's an unfair and unequal playing ground. And the discussion should take as long as the discussion needs to take. And we need to have the patience for that. And one of my favorite examples about that is that participation can include even the littlest ones. And one morning, my partner was going to go on a ski tour for the day, and I was going to be with his daughter for the day. And then all of a sudden he came back to me and he said, no, I'm going to stay and have breakfast with my daughter and then go on a shorter ski tour. And I'm like, what is that about? And he said, well, she and I had a discussion about it. You know, she's 6, and they had a discussion about it. And she had a vote, and she said, no, Papa, you know, because we live in America most of the year. She said, I don't get to see you that much. And so I would like it if we compromised and you and I had breakfast and you took a shorter ski tour and then you went off for the rest of the day. There was a discussion, a vote, and then we had more substantial unanimity. And that's an example of the general warranties of the conference at work, in relationship, and in daily life. And then we talk about being punitive and how nothing should be personally punitive. And I don't want to be punitive to other people, but I also don't want to be punitive to myself. You know, what is my negative self-talk? Where is my self-esteem? How am I treating myself? And then, you know, I did something punitive to my mom yesterday, for which I owe amends today. And it has to do with her memory, because it's not great. And I really expected her to remember something that she is simply not capable of remembering. And my jab, my reaction was personally punitive. And that's a violation of this concept. And so I need to make my amends to her today. And, you know, whether it's lashing out or hoarding my energy or being judgmental and critical. I mean, there's all the different ways that we can be personally punitive. And we clean that up in the 10th step. We clean that up in the 10th step, you know, and setting boundaries is one of the ways, because setting boundaries takes really good communication skills. You know, I have to, and there's civilizing ingredient in my relationships. And what I've learned is how to ask for what I need and want without being personally punitive, is by making I statements and using feeling words. Mom, I really need and want, when I have a conversation with my sister, for that to stay in the channel between her and me. And when I have a conversation with you, that stays in between you and me. And I say how I feel and what I need and want, rather than saying, Mom, when you do that, that's gossiping. Or Mom, when you do that, that's carrying tales. Very different energy. One is more personally punitive and one is much cleaner. And then, you know, I'm just going to close with the last one about how everything should be democratic in thought and action. That's a tall order. That is a tall order. What does it mean to be democratic in thought and action? It means to be democratic in thought and action. It means to be, to keep an open mind, to be flexible, to have a gentle spirit, to be soft, to be tender-hearted, to avoid controversy. And you know what my goal is in Alcoholics Anonymous, and with the spiritual awakening that comes as a result of the 12th step, and by using the emotional sobriety that comes with the 12 traditions and the 12 concepts of service, is to outgrow binary dualistic thinking. You know, and I think I'm introduced to that in tradition 1, where Bill talks about this in the 12 and 12, that instead of it becoming either or, I get to move into the both and. The group matters and the individual matters. And so I want to have this this unified, holistic thinking, where I can hold complexity and I can hold paradox, and multiple things can be true at the same time. I can hurt and I can heal. I can love you and be disappointed at the same time. I can be scared to death to be sometimes in this constellation with my husband's daughter and the mom, and I can show up and participate and be robust, and my trust muscle can be really strong all at the same time. I can act well, democratic in action, and I can think well too. That my thoughts can heal along with my actions. And I think that what Alcoholics Anonymous is offering me when I use these and invoke these concepts of service is the spiritual awakening and the transformation of consciousness. And there's a real gap there, you know, and there's some quotes from different religious texts about that space in between my highest values and aspirations and then my behavior. You know, there's what I actually do, and there's what I hope to manifest. And I think that all 36 of our principles together get me a little bit closer to where I actually want to be. And by being in this conference today and hearing everyone who's spoken over the weekend, I really hear that to which I aspire. And I'm just so honored to have had the opportunity to share with you a little bit about how I use the concepts in my relationships. And, you know, these thoughts are not conference approved. They are just between my two ears and what I try to do on a daily basis. So thank you for letting me share. And it's been a pleasure and an honor, and God bless and keep you.